Welcome, YouTubers. This is a video on volleyball and keys to winning, and sort of hidden oddball keys are the keys that I like to look at. A little different than your traditional look. So, next slide. While you watch this, realize there's some videos on the Have a Ball YouTube channel that I put out there. Some intermediate player tips. Volleyball positions 1 through 6 and 7 must-know volleyball attacks. Those are good reviews for you. Everything there is applicable, pretty standard volleyball stuff. But it kind of gives you a little background to where I'm coming from when I put this video out. So hidden tactics. When I say that, when I'm thinking about tactically about the game of volleyball, I sort of take an approach that volleyball is a game of errors. And I know that people make super plays and people do all kinds of stuff that you really wouldn't call an error in a traditional sense. But at the end of the day, when you rewatch and rewind a video and you watch a video of a volleyball game, usually you can narrow it down to the errors that cost the losing team. Lack of perfection, I guess, right? You know, whatever you want to call it. And so those are the important things to look at tactically, if you want to improve, or is to explain, or what you need to work against, or at least be aware of as a volleyball player. Really helps your game when you think about that. Some people go out and play volleyball and just stick to the skills and really don't have a high volleyball IQ or anything else like that. So this is a little help. Hopefully this video helps you in that regards. So in that manner, I listed 4 hidden tactics here, in order of most important to least important, and I'll go into some explanation why I chose them. But the right side blocker is an important person, one that you don't typically think of as being important, but very important tactically. I'll get some tips and errors on that. Overload is another tactic in volleyball that you just don't think about initially, but of course very important. Outside hitter, everybody knows about outside hitter. I'm almost ashamed to put this as a hidden tactic, but I really couldn't round out the video without having outside hitter out there, because they're a pretty important player. Just like having a quarterback on a football team, real important. Outside hitters, pair outside hitters on your team usually makes all the difference in the world. Can certainly lose you a ton of matches if you don't have a pair of good outside hitters. Everybody knows who the outsider hitter is. Everybody wants to be the outside hitter. So anyways, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then I put service down here. We'll talk a little bit about that. That one's sort of obvious. A lot of people would list service receive as a very important team skill, but there's not much you can do on service receive. It's sort of just practice, memory manage. It's really a byproduct of service, is what I'm saying. At least conceptually, that's what I'm thinking of here. So yeah, service not passing the ball well and digging the ball well is shows up, and usually that's an excuse. It's usually a byproduct of some of the others that we're looking at here, especially on serve receive. So let's get right into the right side blocker. So right side blocker, useful to be tall, right? But that doesn't matter quite as much. But let me think about all these tactics in terms of, when you're playing this, what's an error, what you can consider a win, even if it's not a point ending type thing, and then just some extra skills. So errors, when you're on the right, you're blocking the outside hitter, which of course I already touched upon being a very important player. The play of the outside hitter usually determines at many levels of volleyball, except for very high levels. The results of a match is how well the opponent's outside hitter or your outside hitter play. So I'm going to talk about what you do as a right side, what you're supposed to do, what you need to do, and what you got to do. And you can really impact the opponent's outside hitter, and hopefully force them into enough errors or just not being effective, and then you win the game by attrition there. So errors, anything that you hit off your right arm, that's pretty typical and out of bounds, so you get tooled. Usually it's off your right arm. It can be off your left hand, if you got your left hand pointing towards the outside of the court rather than the inside, and they hit it off that and it goes out. But usually you get hit off, and sometimes you jump too high, it gets hit off your elbow. Sometimes it's your wrist. But you need to try to pull that right arm a little closer to the net, sometimes a little higher, but you don't want to get your elbow involved, or towards the antenna, so maybe they hit the antenna before they hit you. A lot of times that angle's coming pretty radically, sometimes from outside the antenna. But that's anytime that happens, just realize that was an error on your part. You need to find a way to adjust to that and make sure that doesn't happen. Any ball hit to the line shot hard or with pace, that's what your right hand is supposed to be covering up. And I know some people say, oh, leave that open and let the person dig it. But usually you're, half the rotations in a 5-1, your setter's back there. You really don't want them having to play defense too hard. And it's a quick shot. It's not a lot of distance between where the outside hitter hits and where the defender is. So usually I like to say, hey, use your right hand, take away the line, make sure they don't hit any line shots. Period. If they hit it, it's got to be, off your hands, soft blocked, or just take it away, block them or whatever. Balls hit to the 1-6 seam, so the 1 being usually the right back defender, and the 6 being the middle back defender. Anything hit to that seam, that's what you're supposed to be taking away with your left hand. So if they hit it with pace to that, then that's your error too. So realize your errors. Of course, if you touch the net, or if they hit a ball and it drops right in front of you on the net, those are almost undefendable, as are, getting tooled, of course. But those are the type of errors, that you're looking at. So if you're making those errors, that's where you need to work on your game and get your thought pattern right, that you don't want to do that. Give away some of those, other things. Now, along that line, wins are any ball hit to the angle digger. You're not really supposed to take away the angle. That's what the middle blocker is supposed to do. And if you're playing in a game where you don't have a middle blocker that gets out there effectively, or they're getting fooled a lot, or they're commit blocking to the middle, whatever it is, and you're leaving a big seam, don't worry about it a whole lot. When you watch the tape over again, that's going to be what that was. I've got an extra skill down there to help you, but don't start, necessarily trying to take away the angle every single time and leaving the line open, or the 1-6. Those are your first commitments. Go out there and play those, and you'll be in good shape. So any ball hit to the angle digger is a win on your part. Any tip, roll, or off-speed shot that the outside hitter goes and does, consider that a win for you, even if it goes down, even if it's a great skilled on their part, and they tip it over just over your hands and it goes down to the court. That's somebody else's ball. It's not your ball. You got them to take, you got them to come off their really, hard hits, right, and putting the ball away. Your defense should pick that up at some point. So you got to consider those wins. And any hitting error that the outside hitter on the opponent's team does, where they hit it in the net, or they hit it in the antenna, or they hit it out of bounds, or they just get flustered. You really get in their head as a right side blocker mentally that you're going to touch a lot of their balls. That's one of your keys, is to try to get a lot of hands on a lot of ball. Let them know that you're going to be there, and you're going to be slightly different spots every time, and you're going to take away anything they want to. If they want to be aggressive and swing blindly, then good luck to them, right? You're going to take it away, or they're going to make a lot of errors. You're going to win the game. So the extra skill I listed out there is, those cases with or without a middle blocker. Usually without is go ahead and drop that left hand late, tight to the net, into the angle. See if you can pick up a touch. Or let them know, if you let them know that you'll do that once in a while, they won't be so quick to crank right at the net level, just by your left armpit, or even a foot or so out from there. They won't want to hit the ball into that, and that takes away a lot of their power shot. That's a hard shot to defend. That's a hard angle, usually to the 5-6 seam, and so they'll end up hitting more balls if you drop that skill in there once in a while. I don't know, a third of the time, or whatever you need to do, that gets them, that lets them know that might be a spot that's not accessible to them, that they'll end up hitting a lot of more balls to your angle digger, typically your libero or the number 5 position. So that's the right side blocking, very important, but not thought of very often, and people don't practice it, and it's not the star of the team. They're probably the only person less thanked is the middle blocker, in terms of recognizing a team. But I think the right side's a little more important just because of the outside hitting. Next screen, concept of overload. Pretty important in volleyball tactically now. An overload just means that you send more hitters than blockers. You have that advantage in volleyball. You should be going ahead and using it at all skill levels. Most people, even at a novice level, with a little bit of practice, they can be effective from the back row. At least simple, like a pipe right down the middle back row. You all of a sudden you figure out that when you can hit that, you can actually be a better outside hitter. So it's a skill that people pick up pretty quickly. So errors are, anytime you see a double block against one of your hitters, you're not overloading. The concept of overloading means that you'll, with 4 attackers and 3 hitters, you'll get a lot of one-on-one or one-on-none, which usually benefits the hitters. So if you see a double block, that's letting you know that you're not overloading particularly well, if it happens routinely. And another error is just weak back row attacks. So you haven't practiced enough to do overload. Your people aren't proficient enough yet, so they're just not very effective from the back row. They're either hitting into a block or they're just really sending over easy balls that are getting picked up non-strategically. Then those are errors, and so that's what you should be looking for. That's more of a coaching standpoint when you watch it back. Winners is when you're using 4 hitters routinely. So yeah, if you're only setting the front row, or you're only setting your a lot of times you see these they only set they set the outside hitter 70% of the time, and they set the middle 30% of the time. They don't even set or dump. That's not overloading. That's basic volleyball. You can win that way, especially if your opponent is inferior. And I understand that, right? You got an inferior opponent, you've got a better skilled team by far, then you can just run that simple offense and you'll win. But you'll struggle against better teams, and so you need to take a look at that and make sure you're using 4 hitters routinely or eligible to hit, and you're actually setting them. And if you see a lot of one-on-one hitting situations, that's usually a win in your overload scheme. Basically, you're deceiving and confusing the defense, especially the blockers. So if you're deceiving and confusing them, that's a good offense. Extra skills is one-on-none, where they get fooled to the point where, you got even if they're coming out of the back row and they're one-on-none. But it's especially nice when you flip a back set and no blocker. And you usually, whether it's a kill or not, you just have to look at it and say that's overload winning. Outside hitter tips, well, there's 1,000 bazillion of them out there. Errors are what I call weak hitting. So again, look at I have a volleyball and the 7 attacks you must know, and the 4 of them are standard ones that you got out of the gate. And so if you're hitting those to a defender and they're picking them up, that's an error on the outside hitter's part. That's the way I'm going to consider it. And any real hitting errors you do, such as out of bounds, into the net, whatever it is, right, hitting the net, those are the errors that add up, and they add up pretty quickly, giving usually the high percentage of outside hitters attempts. Any win is, again, what I call the advanced 3 on the 7 attacks video that I had, which is anything you're hitting to the 1-6 gap, the 5-6 gap, or you're tooling the blockers. That's advanced volleyball. I'll call that wins. I guess you can call it a win if you crank angle to the libero and they don't get it up for some reason, but you got to realize the percentages. So at high levels of play, you don't get away with that. If you get away with it 80% of the time, that's 20% of the time it's coming up, and that might cost you a game in a tight match. So those 3 hits are winners. So that's advanced volleyball and really good skills, because they're just basically undefendable. Extra skills, as an outside hitter, you want somebody who's not necessarily the captain, but like a captain, late set hero. So not afraid to get the ball late and doesn't make a lot of errors late in a set. When it's 5-5, that's one thing, but when it's 20-20, yeah, those errors count a little bit more. And how they react to those errors, you want them to be the hero, make the play. Another skill for an outside hitter is out of system efficiency. So yeah, everybody can be fairly efficient when you're in system, but those outside hitters tend to get those crazy balls where everybody in the gym knows, it's been, the setter's not setting it or whatever it is, right? Somebody else, they know the ball's going there, so there's going to be a double block. There should be a double block there. You don't have any deception or overload. And how they hit in those situations is a good thing to look at on the video reviews, and to judge your players in that manner and judge your play. So if you got somebody who's got some of those skills, you have to. It's kind of a gamble because you have to figure out how often you'll be out of system. Coming up in the next match, you can take your past matches too and figure out, hey, if we're just not a good defensive team, we have a lot of out of system play, we're scrappy, then that outside hitter who can be a little more efficient in that versus being efficient in system. Ideally, you'd want to be both, but it's just not the way things are in the real world. Somebody on the bench might be a better out of system efficiency hitter, and might be more useful to the team. Service very important. You usually want to serve hard. An error in service is, unacceptable error ratio. So a lot of people do that service to aces. I could do it service to aces and out of systems. Probably a little bit better. It's not a stat you're going to see easily on the stat review, but when we're watching video over again, you're watching it and you're thinking about your team, then so just unacceptable error to error ratio. You want them to serve hard, so they're going to make some errors. I could call it an error just looping the ball in, whether you score points or not, right? It's like that's just not good volleyball. A win, you can consider it a win anytime the opponent is out of system. So that includes aces, of course, but any time that they make a bad pass and they can't really run their good volleyball, that's good enough at most levels of volleyball to say that serve was a decent serve. Even if they end up siding out on you, so be it. Extra skills, pretty much. I could have called it an error too to sit at the line and just not jump float at least. And you see that at all. People just stand at the line and doing traditional serving. Really, you don't add a lot of risk with a jump float, and usually you add pace that you don't have standing on the ground, and all kinds of good benefits. And you don't really, not much of a risk with a jump float. So get your players jump floating, get them serving tough and fast and low, serving to gaps, right, or serving lines. Lines or gaps. Obviously, if you're just blooping balls over to their best passer and they're making, putting balls in the system right on top of the setter's head, that's what you want to avoid. I could include real aggressive jump spin serves, but that's, pretty rare that someone has really good skills. I mean, it's always useful to have one or two on the team that jump spin serve, but again, everybody on the team should be jump floating, and jump floating not just from the right side but also from the left side, and just variation seems to cause more problems. You could have a team of jump servers that all serve from 10 feet in from the right side, and believe it or not, for the opponents it ends up being a little bit easier as long as they can handle your jump serves. And like I said, pretty elite. If you had a team of 6 elite jump servers, that would be, I don't know, the first in volleyball history maybe. But most people don't have that on their team, and most skill sets aren't there. So the variation comes in where you got people attacking from the left, the right, left-handers, right-handers. Variation within the game seems to get people off. They don't get in a routine serve receiving. Just a few extra points once in a while that happen. So those are my primary oddball skills that are real important when you're evaluating volleyball, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.